All systems nominal.
それでは早速全速前進
You wanna know what the weak point of a mech is? The fucking pilot.
Get away from her, you bitch!
His papers say he was a raven.
Protocol 3.
A pattern blue!
Welcome to On the Shoulders of Giants, a robot power hour discussing mechs across media, their stories, and why we love them. I'm Alice, and I'm joined by Brian.
I'm going into labor!
And Nico.
I'm gonna go join the guys, because I love hanging out with my bros.
This time around, we're discussing how difficult it can be dating in your 30s, especially when mechs are involved. Patlabor 2, let's commence the situation.
Traffic on the bridge was suspended due to a bomb threat that was phoned in. The police are investigating who the caller was and considering how this case might relate to the latest series of terrorism. 10 p.m. and even now, the Metropolitan Expressway
view is that this was a well-coordinated, large-scale terrorist attack. Numerous eyewitnesses have claimed the sound of a jet aircraft could be heard when the explosion took place.
Because that's what they call it in Patlabor. They say commence the situation.
They do say that, actually. That's really true.
Oh my god. So, okay, just right off the top of the it's Patlabor, not Patlabor.
Yes, Patlabor, because it stands for patrol labor.
That makes sense, but my whole life, I've never watched this movie, but I've seen the word, right?
Yeah, it's not a French chef. It's not Patlabor.
Literally said that. My very brave spouse last night literally said, maybe it's French, and we both just took turns saying Patlabor to each other to just completely lose the consonants.
Jesus. So, in particular, we are watching a little show called Patlabor 2, the movie. Now, different than Patlabor, the movie, because this is Patlabor 2, the movie, but it is also different than Patlabor WXIII, the movie, because they have to let you know it's a movie.
I'm glad I'm finally learning to count. My kindergarten teacher's going to be so proud of me.
So this was produced in 1998 by Headgear. Headgear is a production group that was working underneath Production IG, who has made a bunch of anime. This movie's about an hour and 48 minutes long, and it's long.
You feel them.
Every minute.
I enjoyed it, but I still felt it, you know?
So this is part of the Patlabor franchise, and the Patlabor franchise is this weird franchise that has about as many OVAs as it had episodes in its anime series. Altogether, there's little over 80 episodes, OVA and series included. There's a manga, there's a couple movies, and there's a live action show that they released in the 2010s that we'll go over another time, I'm sure, because it's quality.
One thing I noticed just watching the credits, and we'll get back to the stuff that happens before the credits, but just on a production note, I noticed the name Satoshi Kon. I did see that in there.
That's a great catch on your part.
I don't know a lot of producers. Like, our good friend, Mr. Kawamori, is new to me. I'm learning of his work now. I'm becoming a new appreciator. I think I would have to be dead under a rock to not know anything about Satoshi Kon. So I felt like the art style, I could feel Millennium Actress. I could feel some of that in that, and I know it just listed him as on layouts, but I'm interested if you have any factoids about his role in the production.
I have a lot on that. So,
Yay!
And good call out on the name. So we can
just start with the summary and then get there.
Yeah. So here's kind of a summary of what happens, right? So this is set in 2002, that faraway year, where you see how Special Vehicles Division 2 personnel have all advanced in their careers in an ever-changing Japan. Now, you two have never experienced this show before, so you don't know the backstory of this character, but you can pick up the vibes. It's a bunch of people who probably were doing something before, and now they're all doing their own parts of life, right? So, No Izumi and Asuma Shinohara are now testing new labors, mechs used in civilian and military affairs, for the Metropolitan Police Department of Tokyo. Isao Ota is now working at the police academy as a trainer, And Mikiyasu Shinsi has been reassigned to the head of general affairs for the Tokyo Police Department. So everybody's their careers have moved forward. Even Shigeo Shiba, who was the young maintenance man from earlier series, is now the head of the maintenance division. His boss finally retired. We also meet two very important characters, Kichi Goto and Shinobu Nagumo. They've remained with us units and are the heads of Division 2 and Division 1, respectively. The SVD remains outcast to their base far in the wharfs and has gotten soft after many years of peace. It's been about 50 years. Oh, sorry.
No, you're totally good. It's so funny. It's like you're updating us on family friends who've been up to stuff, and I'm like, I don't know these people. I'm like, I care about them now, but I don't know shit about their careers prior to this. To me, they were born fully formed on this strip of land.
It has been over 50 years since the end of World War II. It's Japan's longest period of peace in its history. We start with a vignette of the United Nations labor unit in the Cambodian War of 1999 being destroyed by enemy forces. This is the impetus for all of the events in the film. After a bombing of the Yokohama Bay Bridge, but it was reported to be a Japanese Air Self-Defense Force airplane, tensions rise as the Ground Self-Defense Force starts sit-in protests at their bases, seeking justice for these actions. In response, the Japanese Diet, their parliament, mobilized loyalist Ground Self-Defense Forces troops to be on standby in major metropolitan areas in case of a potential coup. Things reached a heated point when helicopters wearing Japanese Air Self-Defense Force markings blew up major bridges in Tokyo Bay, comm centers, and the SV2 headquarters. There's even some ECM jamming blimps, causing panic and disarray in Tokyo. During all of this, Goto and Shinobu work with a member of the JSDF intelligence unit to try and track down the man responsible, Shinobu's former teacher and the unit commander of the UN labor force that was destroyed.
Mads Mikkelsen.
Mads Mikkelsen, yes. After getting the gang back together and getting their old labors out, they use an unused part of the Ginza line to approach an artificial island being used as the hideout. The terrorist activities, which were being hidden under the potential coup, is stopped before Japan can be plunged into a new civil war. And so that's kind of a summary of what happened. It's a stripped-down version of what happened and kind of the major notes. I just started
nodding because it's like, yeah, that did happen.
Yeah.
But even in the summary that you gave, like, there were bits that I kind of missed, because one thing I will say about this movie, so we watched the subbed version, I think all of us did. Or did you watch
the dub? Because I watched both, and I actually think the dub of Patlabor is very good. Don't cancel me.
I'm not going to cancel you. I do want to be mindful of the SAG-AFTRA strike, but
we should probably look up the cast for that.
Well, I'm just going to restrict my comments to the sub and say it was really hard to make notes on this film. I was streaming it from my laptop completely legally, and I didn't have like a remote where I could hit pause. And so I kept just like frantically going between Notes app on my phone and like reading the subtitles, because this is a dialogue heavy film. People be talking.
That's the thing about the summary, right? That is pretty much all that happens. Like, 3 things happen in this 2-hour movie. The rest is people sitting in cars talking. And don't get me wrong, the dialogue is magnificent. The writing is so good.
The artistry, yeah.
In terms of like plot, like 4 things happen.
Yeah, and honestly, if you really just dive into it, it's just a bunch of escalation for one little firefight and a guy being arrested with no violence.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get into that after the break.
Hey, Nico here in the break. Just wanted to let you know that while this is a podcast, and we'll always do our best to describe visuals we're commenting on, we'll also include links to the mechs and images we discuss in the show notes, and post actual photos on our show website. Along with that, make sure to check the show notes for content warnings as appropriate to the episode. That's all for now. Back to the show. So there were 2 texts that immediately became intertext for me watching this movie. And I think it's interesting because I think I'll have to check the publication date on one of them, but I think that was Yeah, the two things that I'm thinking of came later. So this was definitely the precursor to them. So Patlabor 2 comes out in 93. It was made the same year as me.
Me too, also.
Oh yeah, and Brian also. But two things immediately for me became essential like touch points thinking about this movie. Patlabor 2 comes out in 93. A book called 6-4 by Hideo Yokoyama comes out in October 2012. And then, Brian, do you know off the top of your head when Shin Godzilla came out?
No, not off the top of my head, but I can just look it up right now.
Yeah, let me look at it.
2016?
Yeah, 2016. So this is interesting to me, the gaps in this, because I feel like they are all dealing with the same thing. And I don't think it's uniquely Japanese, but I think the fact that I've seen it 3 times makes me reflect on the specific Japanese perspective, and that is interdepartmental and intergovernmental horseshit.
Yeah.
So this Patlabor 2 is deeply concerned with the politics between information bureaus, governments, sections of the army, sections of the police, all that kind of stuff. 6-4 is a crime novel about a missing child and a police detective whose own child goes missing. That is deeply concerned with the relationship between the police, the prefectural government, and the media.
Oh, there's a TV series coming out this year.
Oh, damn. And then, of course, Shin Godzilla is all about government response to Godzilla attack. And so there's a lot of inter-bureau and interdepartmental horseshit that happens. And I just kept coming back to those because it's such an interesting movie, so concerned with what happens when people don't communicate in positions of power.
Well, specifically, Shin Godzilla is like directly pointing a finger at the Japanese government's response to like the nuclear meltdown situation that they had.
At Fukushima.
That general line of fiction from Japan is really seems very comfortable doing that, which is the thing that I really like. Whereas our media gets to be, if it mentions the military, then it gets to be strangled by
DOD money.
Whatever fucking money path you can like retroactively justify involving some censorship bullshit or sponsorship bullshit.
Yep.
But, we're out here.
Yeah. And I mean, if you know things about the history of Japan and kind of where it came out of World War II, which this movie speaks a lot to, is Japan lost for a lot of reasons, right? And part of that is that their inter-military relations were never good because the Army hated the Navy and the Navy hated the Army. And this is kind of extrapolated. A lot of what you saw in this specific era as we had come out of the Cold War and Japan had gone through such a long period of peace and is still in it at the benefit of the U.S. Armed Forces stationed there is that they are their own kind of puppet state. They do have military powers who bicker between each other, but haven't had a war on their doorstep since the Total War of 1945. And some people fetishize that in their culture, and some people fear it, and some people like something that they call about is an unjust peace, right? Is the peace that Japan...
I have quotes written down.
I have quotes written down. Oh my god.
Shoutouts to Goto. He has the best lines in the film.
Yeah, Goto gets to be the mouthpiece of like the rhetoric, and I love it for him.
Goto and his counterpart, the JSDF detective.
Yes, Mr. Arakawa.
Arakawa.
The eyeball guy?
They're the two ideologies of a just war and an unjust peace. And their conversations flow throughout the film. So I guess we really didn't talk about it, but what did you know of Patlabor before I made you watch this?
The word, which I was mispronouncing.
Patlabor, correct. Brian, did you know anything?
Patlabor?
I had never even seen the word before. It's such a weird miss for me because I've been on robot shit my whole life, but I had never even heard this before you put it on the schedule. So.
And I'm going to say the obvious here. Yeah. This movie is in such conversation with Ghost in the Shell, or rather, Ghost in the Shell came out in 95, didn't it?
So let's jump into it.
But they are in conversation.
The director and lead creator of this was a man named Mamoru Oshii. Where do you know that name from? That's right. He's the person behind Ghost in the Shell. He directed the first movie.
Okay.
So in 93, he makes this movie. This is one of his, he's directed a lot of movies, and this is kind of him getting into what he wants Ghost in the Shell to be, which is a lot of normal people talking about very intense things.
The consequences of modernity.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is 2 years before that, and that's when he really kind of shines. But that's why you kind of see a lot of Ghost in the Shell. The long talking sequence in front of still shots comes from this. You also kind of see some of the same themes that come up.
Oh my god, so completely, yeah.
So the fun part about this is actually kind of a take on a 2-part OVA called The SV2's Longest Day, which kind of has the same theme of terrorists trying to attack Tokyo, but without this undertext of the fighting politics of our many military forces. Where it differs from that is that this one was taken with more of a realistic approach. This wasn't meant to be like a fun jaunt. This is supposed to be, I mean, there's a lot of things it's supposed to be. There's many writings on this and a lot of interviews with the director and the Headgear staff. Headgear is 5 people. I want to be clear. It's 5 people.
Jesus.
That's insane.
It's this small little production. I want to read Headgear's philosophy of why they came together. So Headgear is a collective of creators established so that all involved could retain full copyright to their work, achieve greater publicity for their work, and sell their own manga to anime sponsors for film production. So something else I want to say is the mecha designer for this is Yutaka Izubuchi, who he's touched a lot of things. Some of the things I wanted to shout out is he helped with the mech design for Eureka 7. He helped with the Gundam series, most notably Char's Counterattack. He's kind of helped a lot and has just been kind of a visionary in the field.
Shout outs.
Yeah, so let's kind of get in it. So can we talk about the opening sequence?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was
for conservatively
so
5
good.
hours. So it comes in, fades out of black for a full minute, and we are met with like a UN guy with eye-tracking helmets.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's in a 2-person labor, because not a labor needs 1 person. This is a spider mech kind of thing.
So yeah, does this transform into a bipedal mech, or are they 2 different units? That was I was a little
There
bit
are 2 units, so they have the standing 1-person labor, and then something that this series does is it has, kind of ones that are just in all shapes and sizes, because not every mech needs to be a standing dude.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, especially in this opening scene, because you see the kind of spider-like mechs, you see the standing labors, and you also see tanks.
And you also see really cool aircraft, which I'm counting as mechs just for the purpose of this movie.
There was a lot of variety in the vehicles that were brought to bear. All white, all UN labeled.
My first note was, this is like real warfare. This is like real UN, especially when they lose.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they don't get approval to shoot people shooting at them. This movie's very subtle.
They don't pause the story to show warehouses for 20 minutes and talk to you about the rhetoric of the movie or anything.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
This quadruped / spider mech is giving huge Ghost in the Shell vibes. I noted that right away, so that's really cool. That it's
like the spider mech from
playing with these toys beforehand.
Oh yeah. No, I'm fascinated by the imaginary of this movie. Like, the fact that this came out in 93, I feel like it was incredibly prescient. One thing I kept coming back to during the sequence is you're put, like, in the eyes and in the headsets of these soldiers. It looks like drone strike footage.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The autonomous, the targeting, the technology and software that's going into warfare. And I think that comes up throughout this envisioning of the future. Like, there's still stuff like VHS, but I feel like this is very prescient for what we were looking at as far as global peacekeeping, armies during quote-unquote peacetime, and just like what modern technology does to warfare. Just, it was so interesting to me, and it felt so real. And it was especially funny to look at this global conflict in a pre-9/11 world.
Well, a really cool part of this is it shows how a lot of modern warfare isn't up in your face, and the only part of the enemy that you see in this segment is through their FLIR, their like heat signature camera.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, when they fired
it was kind of scary.
Yeah,
they fired chaff to try and get away from the RPGs. It works partially.
But yeah, you just see these robots just get shredded. And
a guy's ejection seat fails.
yeah,
It's this little scene where one of the UN guys, he's like, I can't eject, my seat's failed.
Rip.
But just shows that like a lot of the mech design in this is meant to be based in realism. If the military were to actually make mechs.
This is such a grounded film.
oh yeah, it's incredibly grounded.
And then after this, we get this head fake of who the main characters are going to be. This was so... This put me on my ass when the movie ended up not being about these people at all.
Well, it is kind of.
They come in at the very end to like wreck shit, but like it is
It's
about
not.
Alice's wife.
It's about my wife.
It's about her.
No, so...
I do want to, before we leave Cambodia behind, I love, okay, this movie is fraught with symbolism. I am blowing the dust off my English degree. I'm so excited to get into
is this about the ruins? Are you about to talk about the ruins?
The ruins, yeah.
Yes.
So after all of this combat, we see one figure eject from his UN combat labor. It is a fellow who we will learn more about later, but he ejects, he's wounded, and he looks up and he is looking at ruins that have an extremely large, like, human figure in them. It's basically a bust. It's head and shoulders. And it's him standing half out of his mech, looking up at this supersized human figure.
We've always been making us but big. We've always been making us but big. It's so good.
God.
It's so good.
It was incredibly cool. I immediately was like, there's something here about huge figures of the sculptures, the smallness of the person. And then, we go into a head fake about who the main character is going to be, but also a tech porn sequence that just...
About 10 minutes showing you the movements of an exoskeleton, eye tracking, the HUD mask with the backward text. Brian, how are you feeling about this scene?
I was like... I was that SpongeBob meme where he's like listening to the iPod and like ascending into heaven. That was me during this. When he does the full like Luke at the end of Empire Strikes Back thing with like the exposed like pistons in the arm and moving the fingers. Oh my god, that was so cool.
Oh yeah. No, this whole sequence was incredible. It reminded me, we just covered Armored Core, but the opening sequence when they're looking at the assembly of the Armored Core. I love mech media that is just like, hey, let's talk about these as a functional piece of heavy machinery. Is this fucked up or what? And I'm into it. It was so cool.
I mean, it had the full experience up to and including the like sound design, the like automatic wrench noises, the like some of the sounds in this movie are incredible. The sounds that those Tachikoma tanks make at the end, oh my god.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sound design amazing.
This is the first non-UN mech that we come across, which is the AVO2.
It's like the most superhero mech anime mech that we see, I feel like.
So this is our first introduction to a stripped-down AVO2.
Okay, it was stripped down. Okay, because the head shape on this thing looked like a Geth from Mass Effect initially.
He's looking like Kamen Rider.
Yeah, but then I guess they put the helmet on and it looks way more humanoid. But I was initially like, whoa, what are we doing here with these little wiggly guys?
We've been really in the 90s in this show recently. And I know a lot of these people talk to each other, and a lot of these people like are the same people between these media franchises. But the mech feet in the 90s mech feet is the same. Pretzels is the same.
Yeah, and now we've just been mining it forever for basketball shoes. So
yeah,
I don't
wow.
think that's how that works. I don't think that's how that works.
Making the Nike joke. They all look like they got the Nike jokes.
It is artistic integrity to keep making the Nike joke.
But yeah, big old feet, but it's got like a helmet, like a Super Sentai style helmet and shoulders. Like, yeah, it's definitely the most cartoonish. The shoulders are
police lights, very noticeably.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
they said we want people to know who we are. And so we're introduced to Now and guy who I really don't care about. The reason that we start on these guys is every single part before this, they've been the main characters. Now is the main character
That's kind of what I thought
Patlabor.
might be the case.
Okay, that makes a certain amount of sense. I will say there is a little bit of a sequel syndrome. You could also call this fanfic syndrome, where there's an assumption of knowledge on the part of the audience that if you don't have it, you can be a little bit confused by the order of events.
That line where that girl says, "I don't need to anymore," I was like, that's doing a lot of lifting that I don't see the top of because I just like...
Yeah, we don't know
haven't known, but that makes sense.
It's almost like you watched a sequel.
when we get to Patlabor 1 in like 4 years.
Patlabor 1 is just mech fighting porn, and Patlabor 2 is existential crisis. But no, she goes over with her friend and she sees her original unit.
Oh, I love him.
Her special guy.
The AV-98 Ingram. So the AV-98 is what they used throughout the entire series. It's kind of gone through a few revisions, but this is kind of the agreed upon design. It's got a big antenna.
This is so funny to me. These look so cartoonish. It's almost incongruous with my memories of this movie that I watched last night.
Well, all of the other mechs are so much more like
all of the other hardware
down.
you see in this movie is so grounded that these guys look wild, and they're not even like wild by mech standards.
And it's like we have to say it at some point. Like there's a point at which like the Japanese concept of like police and cops is not based in the same sort of sociopolitical mishmash of bullshit that ours is.
Yeah.
And yet this imagery is troublesome to me. I don't like the shoulders very much. It's hard to like reconcile.
It's standard gendarmerie. It's standard cop shit. You know.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
I actually want to show you something, and I'll put it in the notes too, but we need to discuss what Japanese cop cars look like briefly, because...
Okay, yeah, I feel like that's going to be very important.
They didn't go far. So...
Oh my god, even the black crest on the chest of this thing.
I'm on the Wikipedia article for police vehicles in Japan.
Don't look up police vehicles in Italy, because you'll go down a hole.
Oh, I love how unnecessarily tall this man is.
Oh, yeah. So they intentionally have put like a plastic cap on it, and the lights in many of these cases actually have extenders to go even higher for safety purposes.
Well, that makes sense because vehicles are different sizes. That makes way more sense than just relying on reflections during the daytime.
Sorry, ACAB accept this car that I'm posting right now. I love it so much. I'm obsessed.
Is that a 1960 something?
It's a Nissan Fairlady. 71.
Oh, okay, so it's right on the cusp.
I just really like that you're trying with the cars. It's so cute. It really is.
No, back to the mechs. I think it is interesting how these cars basically have mustaches, and they've realized that is sort of like a bandeau on the mechs. They've all got kind of a little tube top.
Oh my god, they've got a little bikini. They've got some action. I love that, actually. I love that for
That's
them.
wild. But yeah, there's way more white on a Japanese cop car than there is on an American cop car. So that's interesting. That makes sense with the white paint on the mechs. Anyway, so she's tested this one. She went back to say goodbye to her lost love, the other one. I really love the animation during all of this, by the way.
Every single frame of this fucking movie is beautiful. Every facial expression is amazingly readable. Like, even when people are not talking. I cannot stop thinking about what happens here in the next few minutes where it's just Alice's wife. I don't know her name. I just know her as Alice's wife. I'm so sorry.
Shinobu.
Is just sitting in her car bored before the bridge explodes.
Yeah.
And her facial expressions are amazing. How are they doing this?
The note I have here is this animation. Look at what they took from us. We have to return.
To go back. We have to turn around.
We have to return with the V in it.
So I'm going to get into this right now because the visuals in this movie are very important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something that they came upon when they were making this, and this is something that my man Oshi wanted, is he didn't want to do rotoscoping. He didn't want to do a lot of these newer techniques, but he also didn't want it to just be an anime. And one of his big focuses on this was that he wanted people's faces to look real in every frame.
Yeah.
He wanted, because in anime, a lot of the expressions are evoked through voices and through motion. And he wanted still frames that could speak to you, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of what they did in this movie is they use that, and they use something, and it's kind of a technique, is their layouts. This is a new style of layout for a lot of them and for this industry. So to speak about your boy,
Satoshi Kon,
this movie uses that to effect. Like, we have to remember that this was made when it was. And like, speaking specifically of the scene of her in the car, the framing of her with her little HUD screen, and she's just sitting there taking calls, and you just see her, like, her face is moving sometimes, and you know, there's minimal motions, but it's so good. It's so good. And then terrorism, right?
Well,
then
one
terrorism.
thing that jumped out at me about this, and you see it later when Noah goes through kind of, I guess, like the dorm hall, and there's a bunch of women kind of watching after the terrorist attack on the TV. But just speaking to the realism of the faces, this is something you notice in like Cowboy Bebop, because that was kind of a priority for them when they were depicting kind of the entire human race in space. There was kind of a diversity of people represented. But this, even just looking at Japan, that group of women and the various characters we see, there's fantastic just like difference in nose shape, skin tone, hair curl pattern. Like, these are just Japanese people for the most part, I have to assume, or, you know, at least, you know, East and Southeast Asian people. But there is like a staggering realism to this without being like weird or uncanny valley, which, especially after coming off of Escaflowne, where everything is like super heightened and pointy 90s anime kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
it's wild to see this.
They've got 4-inch eyes. Yeah, exactly.
It's wild to see this push towards like realism to convey that. It's really cool.
So the bridge, Shinobu's in her car and she's stuck in traffic. She just wants to get back for work, and then she is passed by.
Yeah, a big labor.
The Type 99 Roadrunner.
I love this thing. The full Tron Harvester drone.
It's so good.
It's a long-length mech made to drive over other cars that are stuck in traffic so that it's a traffic cop car, but a mech.
I love it. It makes actual sense.
Cool. Yeah.
It's like, do you remember a while back? I think they may have been fake, but there were those concepts for the Chinese buses that were made to go over traffic.
Yeah, I do remember this.
It reminds me of that.
And even better, here's one for you, Nico.
Mm-hmm.
It gives warnings that it's about to pass, so don't open your car doors.
I love that.
It's giving very nice warnings to people that, you know, if you open your door, I'm driving over you and you might lose a door.
You can actually see the utility of like advanced robotic hardware for society in this movie. And like, a lot of it's bad, but this kind of shit actually makes sense. Like, if you need to get to a car crash, the problem with car crashes is they tend to create huge backups leading up to the car crash. Like, getting emergency responders there faster would be like, oh, it's incredible. I love the imagination behind this.
It's so good.
Boom.
So, they think there's a bomb on the bridge, and then what ends up happening is a missile was fired at the bridge from a plane and blows up the bridge. Something I want to note here, because I found this during my research and it made me so happy. So this is caught on camera, right? This is caught in a recording. So the timestamp in the recording is 2:26, which is a reference to the Kyoju incident, or the February 26th incident, in which the Japanese military attempted a coup of the empire.
Jesus, that's a deep cut.
It was a bloodless coup where they just, you know, showed up, military men, and they were like, nope, military should be in charge, and it didn't work. So kind of a really deep cut, but
damn,
small.
That's wild.
I thought thought that the missile had blown her up, and I was like, damn, rip Alice's wife. And then I was like, oh, never mind. Not rip Alice's wife.
No, so yeah, it's wild. She watches a bridge get blown up in front of
and
her.
Then we get... And this part was entirely for me. I don't know how you guys feel about it. The air defense 15-minute segment where they believe that rogue
I have
pilots...
in my notes all in caps, Alice's shit spotted.
So that's a whole 15-minute segment about them having to scrambling interceptors, and you watched it subbed, right? You watched it subbed.
Yeah.
So the sub version... you notice that they switched to using English when they're in the planes, right?
Yeah.
It was actually pretty good English, too. I actually was like,
it was better English than Shin Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
Wizard, contactはまだか?
Target did the head 25, Wizard 03. How about contact?
Negative contact. Request target altitude.
So the reason for that is they intentionally got voice actors with good English because the Japan Air Self-Defense Force is part of the defense agreement with the U.S. military. So because of that, they have to use English calls.
So remember when I was talking about the messy thing about money and military and movies not being as prevalent?
Oh, yeah.
I'm eating my words. I was speaking out of my ass. This is my notes app apology. Never mind. I withdraw.
No, I mean, this movie is so interested in the kind of, to borrow the term from the Britain-U.S. relation, the special relationship here.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
that's just, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was really fascinating. They switched that. And then like the news montage, they had coverage in just like English and Japanese. And then the identification of the plane from the silhouette. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I have a thing about this actually, the plane thing.
Yeah.
There is a song that plays during this sequence and it plays again later. I am going to look it up. I need to reference exactly what it's called.
We can just say that the OST for this kind of rips, right? Like
we can also say that, but specifically this song, which by the way, Spotify has the entire soundtrack for this movie specifically.
1 sec, I'm adding it.
It is called Wyvern. The guy who scored this, Kenji Kawai, also scored like a bunch of Fate Stay Night and like the original run of Higurashi, so like he's very in anime.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah. This song Wyvern, I know for a fact I have heard this song before, and it was like driving me nuts. I still don't know how I've heard it before. I know I've never watched Patlabor. I know this. If anybody out there knows why the fuck I know this song, please let me know, because I swear to God.
Please let us know, questions at osgpod.com, because yeah, that's funny.
It's such a good song. It's such a good song too. Like,
this is the frustrating version of when I heard Dylan Dow speak and immediately knew that was the voice actress of Envy.
Yeah.
This is the version where it's like, oh, I know it, but I don't know where from. Oof.
But all of the music in this is so Kenji Kawai shout outs. I'm going to be looking out for you in the world now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, the movie has given us action. So now we have to get into philosophy. So Goto and Shinobu are approached by Mr. Arakawa from the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force. Sorry, the Japanese Self-Defense Force, because the intelligence unit is not aligned with either the ground or the air self-defense force.
I love this man.
And so he starts to tell them about this plot that's happening, right? He's trying to work them through this. And how do you guys feel?
He doesn't know how to work the tape deck.
Can we talk about how this is a world where both mechs exist as well as
VHS? And there's high definition VHS.
And Alice's wife is the only one that knows how to work the surround sound. It's so funny.
Oh my God. The angle when they're all looking at the VHS screen and they're like pushing each other for space to look at it. I love the angles in this. There's a lot of fisheye. There's a lot of like really interesting shots to this, for all that there's a lot of like still figures over a moving background. There are really wild shots in this, like this one where they're trying to look at the VCR. Arakawa is an interesting figure to me, the intelligence guy.
I love him.
I love him too.
He says something later, which I think is relevant the very first moment that you see him, which is in talking about the fact that he doesn't wear a uniform, but he has to carefully curate his appearance.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting because one of the first things you notice about this character, if you're looking very closely, which I watched this on my big old TV with my very brave spouse, so I saw this, he has a lazy eye. Yeah. And you see this throughout, and his features are definitely drawn in a way where he almost looks like amphibian or reptilian. There's a broadness to his face. There's a width between his eyes.
He's a lizard person. Yeah.
It's definitely. I don't want to get into that because of the literal anti-Semitism of that, but like, there's an interesting thing where he literally. He looks like a totally normal guy if you look at his hair, his outfit. He's bringing them files in a briefcase. Like, you know, he's got kind of a shady position being in intelligence, but...
We don't really see his face for, like, a little while.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with his glasses and light.
His glasses, when they're, like, about to watch the tape and he, like, has the tape behind him and he, like, turns to look at the tape deck. You don't... Like, he turns and then it cuts the tape deck to show the long period of silence where he stares at the tape deck and then asks...
do you want to put this in? Yeah. It's so interesting to me that he looks unsettling, but also it's complicated for me because, I mean, this makes me think of, weirdly enough, the Wonder Woman movie. There is a big fixation in a lot of things to indicate potential villainy with slight disability.
I feel like this movie wanted me to believe that he was like on the bad guy side or something.
From the jump. Yeah. Oh, yeah, great shot, Alice, where his eyes are totally obliterated by the screen light, but the other characters literally... I mean, there's something to be said there. The other characters don't wear corrective lenses, so that doesn't happen to them.
Right.
He's an interesting character. I think he's a complicated character, and I think I kind of picked up what they were putting down as far as like what they wanted us to take away from just looking at him.
Yeah.
But it also like made me feel a kind of way because I'm like, okay, I know, but why these flags are being like put up?
Yeah.
But I love him. Like I'll stand him. You know what? Yeah. Be an agent on the inside.
I was really glad when he was kind of like not really. I mean, I didn't know where the plot was going, so like, I didn't know if there was going to be a coup or if he was in charge of the coup or whatever. But I loved him playing like kind of an outside field sort of like info guy.
He's a solo operator with the appearance of being deep in the machine, which is very interesting. Anyway, I hope that's what you were looking for, Alex, because we immediately like went off on my man Arakawa.
Yes, they meet Arakawa and they go on a Yuri aquarium date together, which is kind of cute. Like
First they get in the car.
Have a meet cute.
First they get in the car. We gotta talk about the first car moment.
We gotta talk about the lighting in the car. They went for it.
The lighting.
It's so good.
The lighting throughout this movie is so interesting. Oh my god.
So it's a static shot of them in the car, and the only thing is the light as they're driving down this covered highway. It's just a beautiful scene. That's it. I have no notes. It's a beautiful scene.
I cannot tell you what they were talking about, but I really thought this scene was beautiful.
Well, they were talking a little bit about Arakawa's position in this and his suspicions about why, and this is something they talk about later. Arakawa basically lays out the beginning of the plot for them in good detail. And like later it's explained why because it seems like he's jumping to conclusions, but later we find out it's like, no, he understands the way that this was supposed to work. So this is all just foregone for him.
Yeah.
But he's laying it out and they're under these lights. And so there's flashes of light in the car that's too bright at times. A lot of times the shot is dark. A lot of times you can't see Arakawa's face and you're looking at the faces of the people in the back seat. And no one's riding shotgun, by the way. He put them both in the back seat, which I thought was interesting.
No, this is such a Ghost in the Shell, specifically standalone complex I think of, because you have this guy who's feeding them info. You don't know what to do with him. You're not sure how contentious of a situation they are in. And then you have this like badass cop and her like kind of muscle-headed sidekick guy, which fully translates and maps perfectly to Bato and Kusanagi. Like there's no other way to interpret their relationship. It's just that.
So as they're driving, the Wyvern intercept happens, and here's where we kind of get into it, right? So things are escalating in Japan. They're talking. There's a lot of talking between these people, and there's some other thoughts, but this is when the mobilization happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an entire scene where the Japanese ground self-defense force, the loyal units, are deployed to kind of, help to address the fact that there are army units potentially preparing for a coup.
Yeah.
And there's just a whole bunch of scenes of them just driving with tanks and stuff. And what they do with the mechs here is really cool, is they're deploying labors just like any other piece of military hardware.
Yeah.
And you know what they're deploying, right? That's right. The Hannibal.
Yeah, this thing fucking rips. This thing fucking rips.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so
I will say it has some Zaku energy. It doesn't have the roundness, but it has no neck. It's got the deep green.
It's squat. It's
interesting.
Like a Zaku.
Yeah.
But
sure.
But you want to know what's interesting about this? Does this look familiar to you?
Yeah, it's the repainted UN. I did not get that until just now. They took the huge gun out of the belt.
Yeah. But there's just some really cool scenes of them just kind of...
I did not catch that at all. Okay, I got to circle back on like two things because I'm looking at my notes. So first of all, way back when we're looking at the VHS footage, first of all, we get introduced to the one regular ass detective who's involved in this shit.
Oh, Japanese Columbo?
Yeah, Japanese Columbo. He is investigating.
Yeah, I love Japanese Columbo.
But no, so he goes to track down original footage of the fighter because he has a suspicion that the shape of the fighter has been miscategorized so that the nationality and the people behind the fighter that shot out the bridge could be misidentified. Kind of a subtle false flag.
Because Arakawa got to the tape first.
So Arakawa got to the tape first. He got the good tape. But this guy shows up on like every screen these people are working from. They are looking at footage of birds. And I need to bring it up. Because
Takahiro Matsui.
Okay, Matsui.
It's the detective's name. Matsui, Detective Matsui.
Birds haunt this movie. There are two animals that really haunt this movie. It's birds and dogs. And I think there's a lot to
there's
unpack.
There's a basset hound later on who's my best friend. But anyway.
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack as far as the symbolism of both of these animals. But it starts from minute one. Like, pretty much anytime you see a screen in this movie, there's a bird on it. And then when birds actually start showing up in the film, is like, I mean, from minute one, there was a bird perched on Now's old mech. So, like... They're all over this movie. I want to bring them up because I feel like after we kind of get through the plot, we've got to discuss.
We will talk about birds.
The bird motif.
There will be a bird climax.
I don't like that phrasing a lot.
Do you ever just support a bird climax?
I'm gonna take a hard stance on this one and say no.
No. But I think before the scenes of the various military outfits being stationed in various places and all of the interesting little scenes of the contrast of civilian and military function, like the kindergartners waving at the tank.
Waving at the Patlabor operator.
That montage is so good. Yeah, where it's just like
that
they're
montage
moving
is
in
good.
everywhere.
But before this montage is the 20-minute warehouse sequence where we get told the thesis of this movie over slow pans of shots of scenery.
You as a policeman, Godo. Me as a self-defense force spook. What is it the two of us are actually trying to protect? It's 50 years since the end of World War II. We've lived our lives never having known war. Violence, yes, but that's recognized as criminal. Never a time when the whole country was dedicated to legal violence. Peace. Is it peace we're working to protect?
Can I give
I
a
just
read
wrote
of
this
like
down
what I think is the core line of this whole thing?
Please read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is for the record, this is Goto and Arakawa talking. These two will discuss a lot throughout the whole movie.
Right. Goto says, an unabashed lust for peace based on unmitigated terror of war. An unjust peace where we avert our eyes from the foreign wars in which others pay the price for that peace. And then Arakawa says, it may be a peace that reeks of gunpowder, but it is still our job to keep it. I will take an unjust peace over a just war any day. And then Goto goes on to kind of clarify that, like, that's cool, but we're not talking, like, this is not an either or, this is a transaction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're related.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, the art is incredible. The line reads are just over the top. Like, it was my favorite part of the movie by far.
Alice, I know you were hesitant for us to get into this movie because you really enjoyed it. Is this part of it? Is this kind of like these moments kind of what you were a little bit hesitant about?
I think it puts a lot of people off because it is just slow, still shots.
Because they are just saying philosophy at you. That is true.
Yeah. But it's so integral to why this is one of, and I'm just going to say it, this is one of, if not the best anime movie.
Yeah.
Of this era, by far. If not of all time.
My notes for this sequence just say, goddamn, what is happening to my psyche, bro?
Yeah, mine says, bruh, the politics of peace in a developed capitalist nation. Because they talk about the Cold War, and that's so important because it's like, if we're looking at the Showa period in Japan and this kind of, this peace and this huge prosperity boom, especially the technology boom, which I feel like distrust in technology and rapidly advancing technology is another huge theme of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, all of these things are knitting together, and this is like just saying out loud, you know, a lot of people talk about U.S. military involvement, and we have not had a war on our land since the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's so funny, but we are so involved in war. We have been in a state of perpetual war for a long time now.
I mean,
you know, to one extent or another.
This whole monologue is actually the plot of Metal Gear Solid 4 also.
Yeah, I just wrote down here, war never changes for this whole segment is my note.
Well, no, because I feel like that, okay. We could.
I have to clarify something about what Alice just said. War never changes is Fallout.
Yeah.
War has changed is Metal Gear 4. And I know this because there's a famous YouTube video where it's like a debate between that guy, Ron Perlman from Fallout, and Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid 4.
I need you to cut that because I've been eviscerated.
No, because I want to talk about it. I think it's so interesting that between Metal Gear and, which I say not having played any Metal Gear
yet.
But like apparently between Metal Gear, I'm gonna get subjected to it, and this film, the points that this is making, and kind of the American reflection on war, the fallout cone, if you will, of war never changes that they repeat over and over is defeatist compared to the confrontation of a line like, it's a piece that reeks of gunpowder, but it's our job to keep it.
Yeah.
Like, war never changes is so flat compared to a sentiment like that. And it's so interesting to me. This movie is confronting acceptance with warfare as long as it literally isn't in your streets.
Sorry, Todd.
And having a figure that wants to put it in your streets. And there's so much media, and I know there's American media doing the same thing, and I know there's Japanese media doing the stuff that big American military jerk-off pieces do, but it was really refreshing to see this after so much of the narrative around war and historical war and modern warfare and how this all works together has been so defeatist. It's so, but war is inevitable. We can't do anything about it.
God, I cannot wait until we play Metal Gear. Oh my God.
Oh my God. But So this sequence, this was so funny. I don't want to talk too much, so Alice cut me off.
Oh, so let me cut you off on that.
Yeah. No, one of my notes here is that this has the energy of a gritty crime drama, but there are mechs in it. And it's so funny because the mechs are so secondary to it. They literally just they show up in the beginning and they show up pictured throughout, and then they show up in the action at the end. But they are not the star of this.
No, they're not. But they show up specifically to cast from like a mechanical standpoint. They show up to make the promise of yes, these will fight at the end. I promise. And they do, and it's fucking spectacular.
Yeah.
Escaflowne, you pretty much did the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But they're also there to kind of cast a shadow, and we talked about this briefly, but they're also there to cast their shadow over the civilian population. There are soldiers everywhere. There's this great shot of a train running by, and this soldier is leaning out of his tank with a cigarette.
Just looking at himself in the reflection of the windows of the train.
And they exist to punctuate those shots to say, okay, but this is what looms in the horizon. Every day your kid goes to school and is reminded that thing may actually level a building or two by the time the month is up, Yeah,
and this is the reality that you live with if you live in a UN-controlled conflict zone. To circle right back around to Cambodia, but I'm thinking specifically of places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Life still continues.
I believe it was... I may be misquoting, but I believe it was Danielle Riendeau who said, it turns out in a horrifying slow motion apocalypse, you do still have to just go to work.
Yeah. So to condense back down to kind of where we had moved ahead to, just all of this is going on. We've got Japanese Columbo running around. We've got ideology. We've got ethical concerns. All of it's in play. We also have a scene in a convenience store where they do COVID-style panic buying, which was incredibly funny.
Oh, that was
It's
funny.
really funny because this is a callback to one of the episodes in the original series where they talk about how getting food where they are, because they're literally in an abandoned wharf is where their base is.
Mm-hmm.
They're literally the cast-offs of the cast-offs of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, so that's a fun little throwback. So we kind of then get it starts to escalate, right? And the impetus for this is my girl Shinobu, my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of thoughts on her because in the original series, Division 1 is the functional group. It exists and they get into some stuff, but they aren't the heroes of the show. The heroes of the show are Division 2. That's the characters that we see a lot in this movie. They're kind of the fuck ups, They're kind of the, they get it done, but they mess a lot up.
They're MASH. And so Shinobu, basically.
And so Shinobu is a Yamato Nadeshiko, a Japanese traditional beauty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the movie, we see her being very elegant, taking her time. When she is out of character, it's never where people can see her. She's always putting forward that I am a strong woman. I am highly decorated. I was climbing up the ranks of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police until I slept with my teacher.
Yeah, there is so much respectability politics in this.
Yeah.
It does a lot with women in these positions of power because she was part of the, and I want to read the full title. So it's called the Suge School is what they call it, right? Because it's run by a man named Suge, but it's technically the Multi-Purpose Walking Machine Operation Research Preparation Committee, more often known as the Suge School.
That's a government committee title if I've ever heard one. As someone who works for an alphabet soup agency,
Right. Yeah, so they realize that she's tied with the person that they believe is behind this. That's why Arakawa has approached. He knows that the person behind this is kind of has a connection with Shinobu.
But crucially, he has approached Goto. He has looped Goto in as his kind of guy that he has his long philosophical talks with and his updates on the situation. And he leaves Shinobu out basically as bait, which we'll see here in a minute. I thought that was such an interesting dynamic because they discussed the fact that she's basically been marginalized for having this romantic entanglement. And her specifically, like, Suge kind of fucked off, but you get information throughout this movie that he was kind of already 1 foot out the door. This guy has already kind of had bigger shit going on. His reputation wasn't something of concern. Her reputation was, and she has been paying for this for a long time. And continues to pay for it throughout this movie again because Arakawa goes to Goto instead of her. Well, he goes to them both initially, but Goto is his guy.
Really is. Okay, so here is... So we go to the scene where she goes to meet Suge. And as she goes to meet Suge, she goes to talk to him, and suddenly the police show up because Goto was told by her mom that she was about to go and do this. Her mom snitched on her to Goto.
Yeah,
and
she got the call. She got a call from Suge. She took the hair down. She goes out to meet him, and fucking Goto snitches on her because her mom snitched on her.
Because she was a jerk to her mom.
Yeah, that's fair.
So this, I mean, fully deserved.
Her mom seems to be the one keeping the house. Like, her mom is the reason that she has a functional house and clean clothes to come grab, you know?
Well, it's also... Japanese families, you live in your house until you get married. And again, she's a traditional Japanese woman, so she lives in the house. And
she is probably not getting married anytime soon because her honor has been besmirched. No. But, like, you know, she's got a complicated situation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, though. Like, that's the fucked up part of it. Ugh.
So I'm going to share a specific layout shot.
Yeah.
So this movie was layouts before it was actual drawings.
And the layouts were, again, by Satoshi Kon. Oh my god, look at this layout.
So this is cut 494, described as Goto who has betrayed Shinobu's trust.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to share some comments from Oshii, the director, on this particular shot. So to describe to the listeners who might not look at the images, it's Goto looking over at Shinobu after... You know, he's told Arakawa and they tried to kill Suge.
It's him on the boat, and especially something actually drawn out in this layout is like the light angles. Because I believe at this point the searchlights are still on from where they have been busted meeting on the boat.
Correct.
Oh my goodness, this is so gorgeous.
I'm just going to read this verbatim. A frontal shot of the face of a man with a guilty conscience is something that would have been unthinkable in animated works of the past. Unlike flesh and blood actors, animated characters are designed to express emotions with the movement of given facial expressions, indicating joy, anger, sorrow, and pleasure. The reason for that isn't a question of drawing ability. Rather, using such symbolic expressions is more convenient and rational when multiple people have to work on a single image. But considering today's general drawing ability and level design, it is not impossible to create such a scene where the face does all the talking. Given the right situation and layouts, chances are that it might work. And I think it does. So this is kind of what triggers SV2 into motion, and we get the whole gang's back montage where everybody's getting together.
They get pulled in, Shinobu gets her gun and badge taken away.
This is the scene I wanted to call out with Goto, though.
Yeah.
Where she, like, confronts the government guys, and they have, like, kind of a shouting match. I don't know what they were on when they were drawing Goto's face in this fucking movie. When he like walks in to this conference and you see like his T-zone on his face and he's like lit from above and like he's just like muttering like little parts of the conversation he had with Arakawa earlier to himself.
Yeah.
Inspector Nagumo, you are hereby relieved of your duty as chief and as the commander of the 1st unit. You will be held in custody until further notice.
Get your hands off me!
Well, Goto, what do you think?
The farther away from the slaughter, the more optimism replaces reality. And the so-called reality is often non-existent at the very highest levels of decision-making. This is especially true when you're losing a war.
What are you talking about? No wars have broken out yet.
No, it broke out long ago. We're too late in figuring it out.
I'm just like, oh, it's
because
so
he
good.
knows what's coming. He has been told.
They're both so prepped for this fucking elevator moment. It's unbelievable. It's so good.
This I know I said that Girls und Panzer, the tank movie, was possibly cinema. I might have to hesitantly say that this is also cinema of the class of Girls und Panzer, but
it's close. I can see it.
And then, of course, Shinobu gets her moment where she, rips the fucking government a new one verbally.
But it's done,
It's a great speech.
it's muted because of the internal dialogue of Goto, and it's done so well.
It's so wild. And then Goto is the one who gets to have, the full crazy doomer shouting at the end, because he is the doomsayer. He is
Well, he doesn't even, he just gets up and literally says, I'm fucking sick of everyone in this room. I'm just gonna leave with her. I'm not even under arrest, but I'm gonna go with her.
Yeah.
Because I hate all of you.
This scene is such a perfect thing of Goto and Shinobu have played by the rules, right? Which is they have done everything, and they're in a room with people who have the power to fix the situation, and all they're concerned about is the decorum, following protocol, and stepping in line.
Again, this is where again I was thinking about 6-4. Because, again, that has a lot of emphasis on the police's relationship with media and, what you show and don't show and the special relationships certain departments might have with the media and the history that has. And then Shin Godzilla, because so much of that movie is centered on the comedy of errors that is government trying to save face when action needs to be taken. It's such a pervading theme of, commentaries on government and on structures. It's great, we've created all these structures to handle this crisis, but they're so big and they're so invested in their self-image that they aren't actually doing what they were created for. So yeah, we gotta go rogue. We gotta go kidnap a husband.
And there's a great excuse for this, because suddenly false flag attacks of the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force helicopters not only fuck up the city, but they blow up the SV2 headquarters, destroying the mechs that we've only just been introduced to and have not seen any combat.
They are
critical infrastructure attacks.
It's and then the shots of these cop mechs just getting absolutely blown to pieces are just,
the mechs are just dismantled.
Music to my ears by bullets.
They're dismantled. Bridges are taken out. They start taking out communication hubs. It is critical infrastructure attacks. And very ominously, we see something that the canny-eyed viewer will have seen around the bridge attack at the very beginning of this movie, which are these gold Modelo-looking or Corona-looking beer blimps.
These unmanned fucking... It's so good.
And this one enters trailed by a horde of cawing crows. And I mean the birds. There have been birds throughout, but the birds, they are back. The birds literally interfere with a shot later. The birds are back. There are guns all over Japan at this point because of the stationing of all the different forces, or all over Tokyo rather. And now there's no way to coordinate or communicate them. There's just weapons everywhere and no way to coordinate.
We see all of them. The camera goes all over the fucking place in this sequence. It is so good.
It's so good.
Yeah, it really takes advantage of the animation medium, the shots from inside machinery, the way that you don't have to go scout a location. We're here now, we can just be in this fucking baby carrier or whatever.
That hot though.
Oh my god.
And then we get home drama for no reason.
What?
There's one of the guys
they start they get the band back together.
He has to go, and his wife doesn't want him to go because she's pregnant. And she's wailing, and it's just
so that is the guy who now works at the main office. He's the smart guy in the series, and he's kind of he's the wife guy of the crew. He's the
Tokugawa.
Yeah, I was gonna
say. We're getting the thing again where it's we don't have the backstory on these characters, so we're just what is happening with this dude and his wife
and his wailing pregnant wife?
Oh my god. But yeah, no, it's just this wild scene. They've had all the mechs destroyed, but they're still mobilizing. They're still getting together. Alice, your wife, does a fucking elevator fight.
Oh my god, they dispatch these gentlemen.
So I wrote this down that Steve Rogers is a bitch.
Yeah.
Because my girl Shinobu beats the shit out of some people in this elevator, and it's beautiful.
At
it's
one
beautiful.
point, Goto gets pinned, and she gets him out of the scrape. It's so good. Like, she's so ready to throw hands.
It really just shows how functional she is. It's very good.
It's very nice because she's been so, like you said, you brought up the Yamato Nadeshiko. Like, she has been so reserved. She has been so careful this whole movie. And for her to just get to go apeshit, like just go nasty on some people in an elevator. Yeah.
They're in this elevator. And shit like looks normal. She looks at Goto one time. The alarm goes off. The lights turn red. Done. These gentlemen are dispatched. It is unbelievable. I was screaming and hooting and hollering.
Oh, yeah. And in the middle of all this, there's been some shit with Japanese Columbo. He got jumped at one point, and he's gathered some information, and he's coordinating, reaching out to SV2. I have a note here. I don't even know what part it relates to, but it's just, I love to sit in cars and talk to men. More of that happens.
Third sitting in cars and talking to men thing.
What else do you need? We then have 9/11, but with blimps. There's some gas warfare. I mean, this whole sequence is just, things are falling apart because everyone was trying to do this the right way, but terrorists don't care about you doing it the right way.
Well, and they're specifically challenging you to fight as if you were in an active war zone. Not defensively, because all of the Japanese warfare stuff is called the self-defense force and stuff. Like, this is asking you, if the warfare is in your streets, if there is gas in your streets, what are you doing? And this is definitely a scene where we see a lot of the U.S. puppeteering of, or treating the Japanese forces at the very least as if it weren't a sovereign country. There's literally a threat made at this point that if this stuff isn't cleared up with Suge, who turns out to be behind all this, if this is not cleared up, they are going to intervene. There will be U.S. intervention on Japanese soil.
There's the threat of a global conflict for sure.
Yeah.
We have to shout out the best bit character, which is this laborer construction guy who earlier in the movie paid for rations with a hard hat full of cash.
Yeah.
There's a sequence in here where he's drinking Yakult and someone's talking to him. I think it's the detective guy. And
Matsui.
The laborer guy says, "You can do a pretty nasty job on an AFV or even a military labor with riot guns using explosive slugs. The important part is to hit the target. Close one eye and take real good aim. That's all." And then the detective says, "What if I run into a tank?" And Buchiyama says, "Then close the other eye too."
I know!
On timer line. So fucking good.
Oh my god.
It's very good. So we then get more mech porn, right? So they have to refit the old units because the new units were destroyed. They get in that weapon argument. Just a lot happens here, right?
Armored Core ass mission. We're looking at wireframe maps of the stuff.
Yeah. It is fully an Armored Core sortie.
It unironically is. We do need to talk about one part of this, which is the first in the series, and if probably the last. They put reactive armor on the mechs, which is just a blue jumpsuit and body armor.
I hated this.
It's so funny.
I have this in my notes. I hated it so much.
There's a moment early in this when they're kind of introducing you to the squad again, where their old timer, who is acting as drill sergeant on all their new recruits who are going to be piloting these labors, one demonstrates exceptional gun use in a labor without the assistance of a fire control system. And then he pulls out a baton and goes ape shit on the target with a baton. And I specifically made a note that was in what situation do we need a giant baton except a club marginalized mechs? And they literally at this point are wearing bulletproof vests they've literally just turned these mechs into big police officers complete with clothes.
I literally have this. So it's I kind of hate these cop mechs. It's there's something cool in there, but it's under all these weird clothes that just make it a big cop, ...
It's a huge cop.
It's just a big dude. They're wearing clothes.
It's wild. It's very... Alice, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the line between all of the military hardware we've seen up to this point and them dressing up their mechs.
So what I think it's trying to get at here is that the only thing that can match a paramilitary force is a paramilitary force. And they're trying to match that energy of, we can't rely on anybody else. We have to not. So the mechs in this series are intentionally designed to look like a fucking police car. They're supposed to be something that you can put on a photo op, make look beautiful. They're equipped in the series with a revolver. That is the weapon they have in the series, is a giant revolver.
And you see it a little bit in this, because I remember seeing the barrel.
Genuinely, I love that. I don't know what this is for me that it turns me off, but I love the giant revolver. I just hate the
this
clothes.
is them trying to match that they know they're going to be fighting military units, but they also have mechs that are designed to fight construction robots at best, right? Like, they're equipped for a war, but they're going to war.
Yeah, I think this is what's getting me, is because they are using military hardware to fight military hardware, but they're dressing it up like a beat cop. And so there's this moment, because there's a lot of the mech battle at the end of this movie that is fought on foot, people versus extremely large machines.
We'll get to there. We're not there yet.
Yeah, but there is a lot of focus. There is a lot of focus on humans versus technology in this movie. And to me, I feel like the clothing, the big version of a normal human scale gun, the baton, it's humanizing what is a weapon of war. And it smacks to me of when hardware was coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan and being handed to police officers. And it changed what a police officer looks like in America. Like, we went from an idea of what a beat cop's uniform would look like to a lot more tactical shit, to military boots, to certain hardware padding, body armor and stuff, even just on regular civilian cops, not SWAT guys.
Yeah.
Like,
and now we have
that
evil
kind of
cyborg
stuff.
dogs.
Yeah, but like it's like they're humanizing the big cop robots as if they are distinct from the robots that they're fighting. And I don't know, something about that hits me wrong.
They are distinct in that they're way lamer, because these fucking awesome tanks are just so sick and make awesome noises. Alice, I think I know where you were gonna go in terms of like right before this fight. So I do want to hear that, because I think I know what it is, which is like the battle plan moment. Yeah,
the battle plan moment. That's what I was gonna do. So yeah, obviously, they're not part of any regular force. They have to use a old part of the Ginza line. We get a really cool train fanatics out there. Get excited. There's some shots of the old Ginza stations that are unused now. Pretty great. But we get a very important scene here with Arakawa.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is this our final car moment?
The turnabout.
This is our final car moment when it's underground and in a railway station. So they all get together. They're all ready. They're talking about the plan. We have to go through this tunnel in part of what's called the Babel.
Them going through the tunnel on the tarped up mechs with the light. It's doing the light thing that we saw at the beginning of the movie. Oh, art.
It's very good. And so they are preparing for this battle. And they're discussing it, hey, we might die, but we got to do this or else, America's going to invade. Yeah. And so then we are left with Goto, and we are left with Arakawa, and here comes Columbo.
Yeah.
Columbo's found some facts. Japanese Columbo has found some facts, and Arakawa was working with Suge up until the point that he actually tried to instigate civil war. So we learned that Arakawa was, and the Japanese government by extension, because he is still an agent of the Japanese government, was trying to push the country into basically repealing Article 10 of their constitution, which comes up in Ghost of the Shell, which is that they can't fight outward wars, right?
Yeah, only self-defense.
And only self-defense. But if you are reliant on the American forces, and if you can never fight another war, you become soft, you become a soft country, a lot of this. And yeah, so he calls him on his shit, and they have one little last conversation it's pretty good.
I love the line I have written down. There has never been a war that wasn't surreal. Because I think that evokes the moment at the beginning of this movie where Suge, who, again, we've, found out he is behind all of this, he gets out of his UN mech and he's wounded and just kind of staring kind of vacantly, and then just sees the old Cambodian ruins and the super huge human figure. And like, yeah, that's a surreal fucking moment. Like, all parts of war are super surreal. And it's like they're in this surreal situation trying to execute this mission in a train tunnel. And Arakawa's getting arrested and all this shit that's going on. And it's like, there never has been a war that wasn't surreal. Fuck.
Yeah.
It's some good shit. Brent, how did you feel about this? Did you see this coming? The football scene? Yeah.
I would like to say that I saw this coming because I do stories and I like stories and I'm familiar with stories. But like, I don't know to what degree. Like, I was kind of bothered by his characterization, like we were talking about earlier, just his physical appearance and how it seems like we're supposed to kind of distrust him off the bat.
Yeah.
But then, it's also the fact that he knows too much. It's also the fact that, like, he is clearly manipulating clearly manipulating Goto into like fixing his fuck up by working with Mads Mikkelsen. So I don't know.
I didn't super see this coming because I thought that Arakawa was going to be more of a plant for whatever the Japanese version of the CIA might be, like whatever government structure might have an interest in using SK2 or SV2 as a deniable asset. Like, I was expecting him to be revealed to be part of the worst of the government tangle at the heart of this. When he was revealed to actually be, a former associate of Suge, who then was trying to figure out how to work with this because it had gotten out of hand, I was kind of endeared to him. The same stuff about disability stands, but I was really endeared to him, not just being like a dog of the government, so to speak, but, he was an outside actor who ended up outside both of the different factions he was supposed to be part of, and he found a temporary home with this ragtag crew. But at the end of the day, what he's done, like, can't be forgiven. Like, there are lines that can't be crossed.
I mean, I feel like he kind of comes together and does the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, he is a complicated character. But
so
I loved him. I know we got to arrest him or whatever, but you know what? Shout out to Arakawa. You were a real one.
He's going to write his novel on jail toilet paper, and
yes,
we'll all be better for it.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. So our penultimate fight in this entire movie is a linear shooter.
Yeah.
Down a tunnel underneath the Babylon Project, which is like a reclamation of unused land in Tokyo. It's the
moment you name anything the Babylon Project, fuck off. Oh my god.
It's a long-term thing in the series. So they go down there. They have the 3 mechs of SV2 as well as one from SV1, which is going to be Shinobu's mech.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go down there and they engage with our little boys.
The U.S. robots.
So Tachikoma Core.
The TRT X66 Ixtal, which is a U.S. labor made by the U.S. military.
Oh my god, the themes, the motifs were obvious now.
It is a guide wire, which means it literally just has a wire attached to it so that it can't succumb to ECM jamming. This is important because, and you don't really know it, but Shinobu's mech has ECM jamming.
They do mention
They actually end up, they end up using it.
Yeah.
Because they have to go to, what do they call it? Naked Eyes. They literally pop their hatches open because they're going to pop the ECM
that so good. This
destroys.
Is so
it's
fucking
so good.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the horror
whole shit
of just, there's a tanked out there with auto cannons, and I'm just gonna pop the hood on my tank.
It's the vulnerabilizing, which is not a word, but it is the making vulnerable of these weapons of war that have been tools of labor that were converted to weapons of war that have become part of policing, which you now must still be vulnerable in to confront literal weapons of war from the occupying U.S. regime. There's so much going on here.
Also, the robots are so cool, and they make, like, really sick noises.
They make sick noises. They move amazingly. The hydraulics are good. And
the human versus machines on foot.
The fact that they only have one rifle that can actually hit this because it's armor piercing, but it can't even do much. Because they're just cops. They have shotguns.
Yeah, but also he fully cleaves one of those tanks' fucking heads off with that rifle. It's so sick looking.
It's such a good shot.
Shoutouts to Ota, who is God's worst soldier and just fucks up completely, like, constantly throughout this fight.
Ota.
He fucks up so bad. He is out here trying to do some police brutality on these mechs. Cannot do it. On these robots. Cannot do it. It's so
Can we talk about...
Starts reciting a poem because he thinks he's gonna die.
Yeah, that was a lot.
When one of them reaches down and pulls out an ankle gun, which is the revolver, I could not stop laughing because I was like, of course cops have ankle guns, even in robot form.
Even in the giant robots. But another special shout out to the light in Shinobu's eyes when she deploys the ECM. That light in her, it was really cool. It was incredibly fucking cool.
Yeah. I waited 90 minutes for her to get into a mech, and it was worth every fucking moment.
Yeah.
Shinobu said, absolutely not. I'm not putting up with any of this shit.
We may not be done talking about the battle, but I was just going to say, and then when she gets out of the mech, the shot of her getting out is like utterly breathtaking. It's one of the best shots of the fucking movie.
So, I mean, we can talk more about the fight, but the fight itself is just, it's
They flood the tunnel, which is like a Chekhov's flooded tunnel.
It's simplistic and beautiful in how it's 2 mechs versus 4 mechs, and they're just kind of in a hallway.
But the 2 mechs are way better. They're literally designed for warfare, whereas, as we've touched on a couple times, this is just police gear. And so they're running into issues. They're running into collateral damage. That's what results in the hallway flood, is because one of the US mechs gets turned so that its gun fires into the ceiling, destabilizing the structure. I immediately had horrified feelings about enclosed space work and dangers and flooding. And I was just like, get out of there. Oh my God, do not drown in this tunnel.
There's the guy who is piloting that who was using that anti-tank rifle. I was so glad he got out of there. I was
biting my fingers. Oh my God,
it was great. They had an escape plan. They always plan out for that.
But they finally get up the elevator. Yeah, go ahead.
So she goes to the elevator, and there's another one waiting for her.
I know.
So
we're in elevators.
They go to this. She sees this, and then it cuts. And it comes to, on the island, the elevator coming up with her destroyed unit.
Yes. Oh my God.
The enemy unit
moment.
Crushed under hers, but both inoperable.
And the birds.
And we don't acknowledge what was happening. She's just like, hey, I'm done. And
they don't do another hallway fight. I think because they've shown you what happens with her, or not hallway fight, elevator fight, because they've shown you what she does in an elevator, which is absolutely beat ass.
Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
They don't need
100%.
The labor is an extension of her, and so she goes and she meets
hair down.
Suge.
She gets out of that thing.
Oh, so there's a beautiful scene, and this is when I first fell in love with my wife. Well, I fell in love with her many times, but she comes up and she has a shotgun because, of course, she does, and she takes off her piloting helmet and kind of just lets her long black hair, her traditional Japanese beauty hair down, and is just, he's just
her
there, and he's
utterly destroyed mech is in the background. It is so detailed and vivid and just so cool looking.
And she's just, you're under arrest. She's just, I'm taking you into custody
the most
at this
intimate
point.
Fucking arrest of all time.
Oh yeah, he does a whole speech, and all I wrote down was, men will literally bring a nation's defense forces to their knees instead of going to therapy.
Yeah.
Because that's what it boils down to. He's so traumatized by his experience of war and the labors and the way that warfare has changed that he did this whole thing.
Little content warning for everybody. This movie does include hand-holding.
Oh my God, explicit
hand-holding.
With fingers interlaced.
God, the way that this is drawn so wonderful. Like their hands intertwine. And then he puts the fucking handcuff on. It's so
He puts the first one on, and then she handcuffs herself to him.
Yeah.
As the helicopter comes down. And the birds are taking off. Oh my God.
And so we then have kind of wrap-up shots of everybody after this point, right? Like, the big baddie is done. We've stopped it. We've stopped him.
There's an interesting confrontation in the helicopter. There's an argument that the pilot.
I want to read the. I do want to.
Oh, and the pilot is Japanese Columbo. By the way, he's still here.
Oh no, he's the co-pilot.
But he's there. He's just there.
But Matsui, Japanese Columbo, is present.
I want to get the exact quote. Can you give me a second?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Alice, do you want me to link you the entire script of the movie?
Can you just read the part where he tells him why didn't you kill yourself for me?
Yeah.
Because it's that particular line. So anyway, we have the scenes where, everybody else comes up. We get the relief that everybody's safe and everybody's here. And this was a bloodless event. No one has died in this movie. No one dies in Patlabor 2.
Not even the old-timer who started reciting a poem because he thought he was dying.
No one is even critically injured in this movie, right? Except for the guys in the elevator, because Shinobu was a little pissed.
Yeah, she beats their asses and they died.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I can read this now.
Thank you.
So it's Detective Matsui. He says, I just got word that your men who escaped by boat surrendered to the security forces. Number of fatalities unknown. God knows how much the damage will add up to. Tell me something. Having caused all this, you haven't taken your life yet? And Suge says, I probably wanted to see a bit more of it. And Matsui says, see what? He says, the future of this city. And then we get the most ominous fucking cut to credits I've ever seen.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's a beautiful shot. It's a beautiful way to just kind of end it in just like a wild way. How did you guys feel about the ending? Let's just get into it. I loved it. I'm gonna come up front. I love this whole thing. It's very of this era of this TV drama. It's just so good.
Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah. And I've spoken to y'all privately about this, just about other things. I don't really like this weird distinction we have about prestige television and camp television or whatever the fuck. It's all media and it's all with intent and it's all very deliberate and artistic to me. But this has what people this has the gravitas. It has the I was about to say cinnamon topography in my serious dissertation. It has the cinematography. It has the artistic direction and the intent and the slow deliberation that people associate with what they call prestige television in a way that felt not only
Oscar bait films.
Oscar bait film that felt not only of the era in the terms of just what the theme work was about and what the content was. It also felt extremely modern in the way that so much of anime and so much of specifically mech anime is a lot of flashing lights, a lot of really kind of flashy animation that's just quick and it clips by.
A lot of combat.
And there's very little to sort of support the intermingling between that. Which, I mean, and that's fine too. Don't get me wrong, Eureka 7 is almost entirely just what's happening between the next really cool sky fight. But I was just so taken aback by the fact that the mechs themselves take a back seat visually, but are just in the background as this unsaid thing,
ever-present threat
throughout so much of this. Yeah, and it was just really it's really special. I don't know that I would go through it again, just because towards in the latter third before the final fight, I was really feeling the drag. It is a very long movie. There is a lot of still shots of people talking. That is just true. I didn't really know what to do with the pacing in places, but yeah, this was really special, I feel like.
So I'm gonna date this podcast immediately, even though we're recording early. This was a very funny movie to watch after just having seen Oppenheimer.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that for you.
Yeah, so Christopher Nolan's 3-hour epic about the life and times of J. Oppenheimer.
Nobody told him to stop Oppenheimer.
No one told him to stop Oppenheimer. It's so interesting because it's a movie that has some thematic parallels in terms of reckoning with the rapid development of technology and its applications in warfare and how it changes it in ways outside of our control. But that is also a movie that likes its meditative silences. It likes its fraught conversations. It likes 2 men in a train car, 2 men in a car, 2 men in a room, that kind of thing. But also, so much of that movie, it's 3 hours long. And frankly, I had the same feeling about that movie that I had about this one, which is that that's a lot of time to invest. But if there is nothing else going on and you're able to just focus on it, you can have a really special and interesting experience of really taking in the subject matter presented to you. It's part of why I love going to movie theaters. And so I just watched Oppenheimer, 3 hours of this, and so much of what that movie is about that people have complained about is how Oppenheimer was handled after the war was done, how his legacy was reckoned with, and especially about the revocation of his security clearance that he had during the war and was revoked afterwards, largely due to investigation into his personal life and previous connections to people who were with the Communist Party before the beginning of the Cold War. And there is so much meditation on that I have heard people talk about as feeling superfluous to the point of the movie, which everyone is talking about as the bomb, right? And like, if you go into this movie wanting mechs, it's going to be like, why are we panning over warehouses talking about the ethics of war? This is the mech movie, right? This is the bomb movie, right? Why are we talking about whether or not this guy can be put in the presidential cabinet, which half of that movie is literally just about the hearing of a major political figure of the time, Strauss, who led kind of the witch hunt into Oppenheimer, as it turned out, and why that ended up being something that put enough people against him that he was the first person since 1925 not to be appointed to a cabinet position he was nominated for.
I mean, both...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say both of these movies do a really important... I mean, I haven't seen Oppenheimer. I probably won't watch it, but I feel like this movie in particular is doing something very important for the mech genre, which is to really, and I mean really, talk about, like, sit in front of the camera, hold your face, like, hold your head in its hands.
Hold your head, make you look at warehouses.
Talk about what it means to put military equipment on the ground, what it means to strafe between streets with this machinery. Like,
what it means for the paradigm of what warfare is to change. And your context to it to change. So again, I did Barbieheimer, I did both movies, and I legitimately enjoyed Oppenheimer more. And so I feel like I was in the perfect headspace to really enjoy this and have my final note be, okay, this was like literary to me. Like,
yeah. No, I agree.
Again, I don't know that it's one that I'll put on the recurring, like, ooh, time to sit down for a fun mech movie. All right, everyone, buckle up, because we're going to watch Patlabor 2. But I feel so enriched for having seen it. And I'm really glad that you brought this, Alice. And I'm glad it's one of our early episodes, because I feel like it is going to be so informative to everything we do going forward.
Oh my God, we're going to talk about fucking Patlabor 2 so much. I can already feel it. I can already feel it.
There's a reason for that. It's kind of a cornerstone. Thank you for that Oppenheimer review. Really appreciated it.
Yeah, you're welcome. This whole podcast was actually my stealth Oppenheimer review. Letterboxd is too choked with memes, so I've turned to our podcast.
I'm gonna burn this thing to the ground.
What were your thoughts, Alice? This is a favorite of yours, you've said.
This is a favorite of mine. I love this movie. I really do. I saw this when I was very, very young. This came out in 1999. I saw this in 2000. Mm-hmm. I was an unaged Eldritch horror, but a very young one at that time. And I mean, I love Shinobu. I self-insert, I self-cessed into this. Is that how you use that word?
No, it's not, but we're going to keep it in.
No, it totally is.
All right.
In fact, I think you should keep using it that way because it's accurate.
I think this does a lot of... It's not a romance. This movie is framed with romance in mind, but it's not a romance. This is a movie that I see as having two coins. The first coin is Japan's never-ending struggle with the fact that they are a military power, but powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And that they lost the war. They lost total war, and they have struggled with a national identity as far as warfare since. Especially because in this Pacific era, so this came out in the Heisei period, this is when Japan started participating in UN enforcement. You know, they started sending units out, and the people there, I don't know, I'm not Japanese, right? But I've also read a lot on post-war Japan and women in post-war Japan in particular, and the change of what a female in Japan is capable of, what they can do. And
you are a known woman, so we can focus on that as a lens into this. So
known woman.
As a known woman, please perceive me. I think this movie does a lot with women in the mech genre. I think this is a movie that is, and the show was female forward and not apologizing for it. And none of the women are sexy. None of them are here. Like, yes, she's a traditional Japanese beauty, but Shinobu's struggle is that she is a woman in Japan. In any other place, she would be revered for her skills, for her attention to detail. She would have already climbed the top, but Japan struggles with not just following the same things that they've always followed. And I think this is done well in that I think the mechs are integral. I know you can argue that the mechs aren't forward in this movie because they aren't, but...
No, but they're like the very skeleton of every moment.
They're a metaphor for Japan's advancement and how it struggles with it because it has this technology that can easily be created for war and used for war. And in the show, and you don't really get it in the movie, they're the leading developer of labor. They are exporting warfare across the world.
It's like cars. You know, there's a reason that some of the most major car manufacturing in the world is Japanese. Like this echoes
electronics manufacturing in general.
Yeah.
But like
because they were
I was gonna say, to put a point on that, it's like, you know, how do they even get to their confrontation at the very end? They get there because people had to lay down rail lines to transport mechs to build the shit that they're about to storm. Right? So it's like, it's like literally in the foundation of their infrastructure and their society.
But I think this is interesting because I think there's definitely a unique Japanese like angle on this, especially with, again, Shinobu kind of embodying that classical Japanese woman, whereas now, by comparison, is the only other woman in this movie, because it is woman forward, but there are like 2 women and then side characters. And by side characters, I mean like background characters. Most of the rest of the squad that is known is all like men. But as a contrast, Noah like has reddish hair. It's a short cut. She's a worker, a laborer, a tester. She isn't holding a figurehead position. She isn't... she's running around in coveralls and doing things like that. And it's not just masculinization, but it's freedom from the confinement of a traditional image. And I think that's something that, while that has a unique Japanese style to it because of the movie and because of where this was made and the people behind it, because it's a Japanese production, it's recognizable to audiences that have dealt with sexism and things like that.
Yeah.
In terms of where a woman is allowed to go and how she's allowed to get there. And I think it's interesting because I think, with the undue influence that the US had on Japan, these were also periods where women in America were going through a lot of these kind of complicated issues, these kind of struggles. Like, there are recognizable shapes to this that are a little bit universal in terms of the challenges that she's facing as a woman and the challenges she's facing presenting maybe a traditional look to the world while also trying to do something that is untraditional for women. And I really enjoyed it. I really liked the contrasting characters, but I did think that like this movie is underscored by fraught relationships, and the focus of it is her and Suge. And like, I like that it kind of pilloried her when they had the boat bust, where Arakawa's like, follow the woman. That kind of was like crucifying her again for this crime from years ago. But like at the end, their intimacy is part of why it is bloodless. That intimacy is part of it.
Doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that like that scene comes from a place of like her entire life is sullied by this fucking situation that she has with this man.
Well, it's people who can't communicate across experiences. I think there's an echo of that in that relationship. I think there's an echo of that in Arakawa and Goto. Just like that they had an understanding and then it breaks down because there's just a fundamental difference in where they are at around this conflict. And again, you broaden it out. You look at the Japanese and American relationship. Like, where do 2 entities touch? How do they interact? What damage does that do? And what are the power dynamics in play? Because Suge had the resources apparently to pull this off. whereas she's been spinning her wheels in need of a promotion for apparently like 5-10 years. So like it's interesting to see that in play.
There's a lot out there written about the gendered reconstruction of Japan post-war, and I think this movie really is just an exemplification of that. Having read a lot of that, I can say, damn Japan, treat yo female mech pilots good. Would be my thought on this.
The real mech pilots that exist in Japan.
Look, we're going to go into a lot of anime with female mech pilots who are not wearing nice, fully body covering uniforms with safety gear.
Yeah, we need the PPE.
So I just want to really appreciate that.
Do y'all want a free preview of our next episode where we talk about the all-female mech squad who are called Topless?
Before we do that, we got to get to something else.
Was that your last thought?
That's my last thought. Before we get to that, we got to get to something else.
We have to rate these damn mechs.
That's right. We got to rate these goddamn mechs. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the table from the horn, and we're going to do this, consider every mech we saw, from the police mechs to the military mechs to the not military mechs. There are some other mechs in this movie, but not many. But we're going to go around, kind of give your justification, your thoughts on these mechs. Give them a score on 1 to 10 on the cool factor. I'll start. This show suffers from what one Nico would describe as the Gundam aesthetic. They're just mostly dudes, just stand-in dudes, especially the main mechs. The mechs in this, they're unique. They're functional. This show puts a lot into functionality. The cockpits themselves, are really functional, but they have the extent of viewing forward into the future from an era when CRTs existed. So the insides of the mechs are boring. Even the newer mech is kind of it's dated pretty immediately, even after release. And honestly, as much as I love Initial D, the aesthetic of the 1980s cop car can only take mech design so far. So, despite me loving this movie, the mechs in them, I'm going to give a 6 out of 10 cool factor. What about you, Bri?
Man, I have to, when I think about these, I have to think about, what we've talked about so far. I need to keep, a record of my ratings because I want to keep, a consistent rubric for, my own personal enjoyment. And
that's a bold strategy. I'm just off the cuff, firing from the waist.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I gave Armored Core 1 a 4. And so kind of leaping off of that. I mean, these mechs are definitely way cooler just because they're drawn more sharply, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a little more pixels than Armored Core. A couple.
Just a few.
1 to 2.
The Roadrunner, the functional mechs, the touch that they kind of repatriate UN mechs for the JDSF mechs and or the other way around is a really cool detail to me. The way that they play with these mechs is pretty cool, but also they suffer from kind of the same problem as the Armored Core mechs, in which when you see them in action, you're just in a fucking big hallway. I need a fucking shell casing to hit a car and blow it up. I need that. You know what I mean? So I'm going to give these a 5.
Ooh, pretty solid. What about you, Nico?
I think I'm going to end up sitting with Alice. I love the variety of purpose-built mechs. I'm scrolling back up to look at these images, and the image of the UN peacekeeping, bug bot that clearly seems to be traversing jungle terrain. They comment in the movie that mechs are not suited to a hyperhuman environment like that, and it was kind of doomed to failure from the start. But you can see that there's some terrain consideration in the UN kind of spider tank mech. I love the heaviness, we talked about, kind of the Zaku similarity of the heavy UN units that have been converted to military units. I really love the Roadrunner. I love the very practical mech of getting to emergency vehicles through traffic clogged streets, or getting to emergency scenes through traffic clogged streets. I really, really, really like the terrible American wired at LAN party gun fucking robot. I love that. Unfortunately, we're at a 6 out of 10 because I don't care about the cop bots. ACAB includes mechs. The more that they made it...
We have to take a hard stance on this. ACAB includes mechs. It just does.
The fact that they have mech-sized revolvers and mech-sized batons and mech-sized flak jackets, it's cute, but it's it kind of just frustrated me because I feel like not to be a Suge apologist, not to be a member of the Suge school, but like he was making points about warfare in the streets, and in a lot of ways the militarization of policing is warfare in the streets by another name.
Yeah.
And this movie cannot take that stance, and its deployment of these cop mechs, it seems to be working really hard to humanize them in comparison to every other piece of hardware that we see.
It betrays kind of like a default state that they have to stay. Yeah. I agree.
And that was frustrating to me ideologically, visually. Like, I had fun with the cop mechs, and I mean, enough cannot be said about the opening sequence of the testing and seeing how everything works. It's great mech porn, but this movie, if it had just been those mechs and we hadn't seen any of the other different cool adaptations of labor evolved technology, which is kind of how I would think of the tank and the Roadrunner.
Yeah, lab tech.
Yeah, like I would not have anything really kind to say about the mechs in this movie. I will say they look great blown up. I don't mean that in a mean way, but we see these cop mechs get shredded like twice specifically by the helicopter, and then at the end
they have such realistic armor. There's no shields. There's no energy shields.
Yeah,
they're getting torn the fuck up.
Shit. They are rending and tearing like metal and also like flesh. There is a malleability to it. And the last scene, the poetic arrest scene where we do see those shredded mechs come up on the elevator, first hers and then later another unit, they looked cool. That's why it's a 6 out of 10 for me. But I can't get behind like the iconic, heroic Patlabors. I can't.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not there for them, and I hate that.
They're police patrol cars. They're trying to look like Kamen Rider out here. They are the weakest of the designs because they were designed to be mid by design.
And I feel the same way about them being put in little outfits as I do dogs. Cut that shit out.
Both stances. I do want to, this one's for the Mill Otaku out there. I do want to be clear that it's the JSDF units that get painted in the UN colors, because generally you loan your vehicles to the UN and then paint them. I just want to put that correction out there so people don't flood us, okay? Don't worry, I got us.
As the co-host of a Mech Podcast, you fucking nerd.
How? All right, we're going to go to break and we'll be right back. Hey guys, Alice here. So, On the Shoulders of Giants is a brand new podcast. We're still getting ourselves started. So, if you like what you're hearing and kind of want to hear more of it, maybe leave a 5-star review on your podcasting app of choice, especially if you're on Apple, because that would really help us out. And if you know anybody who might like mechs, point them in our direction. We'd love to hear from them, and, maybe they'll like what we're giving out there. Again, if you like us, leave us a note, send us a message, leave us a review. Just, interact with us. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's go back to the episode. All right, welcome back. Before we get into the game, and there is a game, calm down. There's a game.
I'm biting you.
Oh, I was panicking.
There's something we didn't circle back on that you brought up earlier, Nico and Brian. And
yes.
It has 2 wings. And it has some feet.
Oh my god. Okay, I was actually just going to do that as my parting thought because I realized we didn't go back to it, but...
I want to talk about the birds for just a brief minute.
I want to talk about the birds and the dogs. Because there are 2 animals in this. Birds are obviously everywhere, but the dogs also have a pretty prominent role to play. What are your thoughts on this, Alice? Like, what I kept pointing this out. I'm lit major brained. Like, what are your thoughts on this as someone who's seen it a couple times?
I want you to go first. I want you guys to go first before I say my piece, because I'm into this movie. I've read a lot of what this man has written on this movie.
That makes sense. You can kind of give us the word of God.
Oh, you're poisoned by knowledge.
He has a wonderful book called Methods, and he has production notes on this movie, and they give a very beautiful eye. So,
I'm gonna need to read that. Okay,
it'll be in the show notes.
In the style of I don my wizard robe and cap, I don my tweed jacket and heavy horn rim glasses.
Do they give you those at graduation, or how does this work?
When you graduate with an English degree, they give you a tweed jacket with the leather patches on the elbows, and they give you the horn-rimmed glasses, and you get your pick, they either give you alcoholism or a really unsettling psychosexual thing with students.
The Suge school?
And see, I haven't had either, so I'm kind of worried. Yeah, the Suge school. I haven't had either yet, so I'm kind of worried it'll sneak up on me unexpectedly, and I'll start either hitting the booze or I'll give too long of a comment in one of these podcasts and then just like gaze deeply in your eyes, Alice, in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable.
So about the birds.
So about the birds. And Brian, cut in, elbow in, whenever you want. You also have a background in this. Birds, fundamentally, if we take the Bible out of it, because a lot of what you will find about bird imagery is poisoned by Christianity. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but just like the icon of the dove is very much, you know, that's where you get birds tied to peace. That's where you get it in Blade Runner with the birds flying away. Like all of that, that's very Christian. And I want to step away from that because, as we all know, Japan is definitely, there are Christians in Japan and there's Christian influence from the opening of Japan and everything, but it's definitely more of a Shintoism as state religion, Buddhism as a major religion kind of situation. So the perspective on those symbols is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's driven home by the fact that there are a lot of different types of birds in this. Mm-hmm. We have seagulls, we have pigeons, we have songbirds, we have crows and ravens, very notably during the blimp scene. We have kind of ubiquitous, whatever could be anything birds on various video footage and in silhouette and things like that. Birds across cultures tend to symbolize freedom because they can fly. They represent mobility, but they also tend to indicate disturbance, because if you're walking through the forest or if you're moving down a city street, human activity tends to disturb birds. So there's an interesting contrast there in the freedom that birds represent, the leaving the earth that birds represent, but also they're very much an indicator. Outraged bird calls and things like that are often used as tone indicators for sudden human disturbance of the natural world. Whereas, by contrast, we have the dog, which is an animal domesticated by humanity way back in the day, unfailingly loyal, often a symbol of cops and military, talking about canine units, but also in phrases like
dog of the military,
let loose the hounds of war. Dogs were literally used in warfare.
War dogs from the Roman times, yeah.
Yeah. Like, dogs have this traditional role, and they're also very much known across cultures as order-taking animals. And dogs don't show up quite as much as birds in this. Birds often also are on screens. There's kind of a remediation of the image of the bird through screens. Dogs are showing up in the streets. Dogs are showing up on boats, especially in the confrontation where they try to bust Suge the first time and kind of let him go.
They brought dogs to that sting. I just want to be clear.
But I mean, I feel like that indicated... We got a lot of the dogs when the military was rolling out into civilian areas because they're in households, they're protectors, they're companion animals, things like that. They're disturbed by the presence of the military to an extent. And we got the dogs on the boats. And I think that was an indication that, like, the people on the boats were going to have a conversation with Shinobu. And then when the intrusion of searchlights, guns, forces came in, then there was the disturbance of the animals and things like that. But the scene that stands out the most to me around dogs is when everything is going down, like we're losing communications and everything, and one of the soldiers is holding a gun and talking to another guy, and they're interrupted by a dog that just goes apeshit barking at them. It perceives them as a threat. There was very much a moment there where I was like, are they going to shoot this dog? Because I was
They did not shoot the dog on screen.
They did not shoot the dog, to be fair.
Great news for all of us, honestly.
Yeah. But, like, that was such an interesting moment of, like, the dogs were kind of in scenes as the military entered the land, but they turned eventually, and the birds were surrounding the blimp, the remote-controlled blimp that was letting this happen, and they were protesting its presence in the airspace. The birds on the island, the seagulls, were constantly disturbed throughout the final confrontation between Suge and Shinobu. There's just a lot going on there between freedom and orders and progress and escape versus companionship and traditional roles and order taking and things like that. And I thought it was super interesting that those motifs came up so much. It's been a minute since I was looking for motifs in anime, but I appreciated the presence of the motif and the room to play in terms of interpreting the symbols. So there you go. And now I'll pretend I'm looking deep into your eyes and making you uncomfortable.
I'm going to look at Brian instead. Brian, do you have any thoughts on the use of animals in this film? Birds in particular?
Honestly, not really. One thing I really liked that kind of kept happening, and then like kind of really came to a climax at the end, a bird climax, if you will.
I don't want to get into the politics of bird ejaculation on the podcast any more than we already have.
One problem with this final scene also is that guys, hey, just real quick.
Yeah.
There is so much bird shit.
Oh, it's everywhere.
They are covered in bird shit. You have to believe me. They are covered in bird shit.
Especially when the helicopter approaches and all the seagulls take off in a sheet. It's unconscionable.
But one thing I wanted to point out is that birds, like specifically, and I mean, this really narrows down a lot of the time in the cultural imaginary to things like cranes and like secretary birds. But birds in Japan specifically, just because I think Japan has some of the coolest birds on Earth. They represent like aristocracy, elegance, longevity, dynasty.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, and Tsuge's whole deal is about kind of the legacy and longevity of war, the cycle of war, the inheritance of war. I mean, Goto at one point says a really banger line about like the fact that he's not trying to necessarily instigate a coup. He's not trying necessarily to egg the US to intercede. He is playing out a stage play in the streets of Japan because he has no idea how else to live his life.
Oh,
yeah.
It's such a good, it's so good.
Yeah.
Oh.
So there's like a permanence to that I think is really reflected in a lot of the bird imagery, but
I don't know. There's a lot you could unpack here. It made me want to do the poem analysis thing where you get out the highlighter and the pencil and the printed copy and you just go to town.
Yeah.
So I may have to do that on that book.
Are you printing anime?
Yeah, I'm printing anime. It's a new technique. I don't know if you've heard about this. I'm printing mechs.
You wouldn't print a mech.
Unfortunately, Grandpa Nico tried to print a Daily Motion video again.
So I'm going to quote an article by Iwa Ishijima.
Word of God.
Because I've looked into this a lot because I'm very obsessed with this movie and a lot of the part of it. And there's so many good, beautiful things. I mean, we talked about the 226 time frame, which is just a thrown off reference. So I'm going to read this excerpt. The birds can have a variety of purposes, putting parallel emphasis on animated and moving things such as cars and people, or leading the gaze to a certain place, though it would still be more natural to focus on the cards or even clouds. Oshii had this to say regarding the birds. There is no meaning behind the birds whatsoever.
I knew that was going to be what it was.
Yeah, so when I first saw this movie as an adult, I was like, oh my God, I'm into metaphors and everything. The birds, what do they mean? Because like there is a lot in this movie if you look, but the birds were actually used as part of the animation and not part of any metaphors or stories. So one of his design philosophies is to distort with incomprehensible and nonsensical things to like keep you on your toes. Like that's why he shifts from long, slow shots to dogs loudly barking and, so none of the animals in here are a metaphor. Let's go to the game.
No. I refuse.
What?
Hold on. I'm throwing a coup on the podcast. Alice, I have unquestioned military superiority, and I have to talk about death of the author.
Unfortunately for you, I have called up the loyalist forces of the Brian Self-Defense Force to come and defend me.
Brian, whose call will you answer?
We're going to have our cake and eat it too. I'm just going to say it now. You do not get to decide what does and does not have meaning in the art that you create.
Thank you. Brian has defected.
That's pretty much it. That's all we have to say on that matter.
No, yes, very quickly, the principle of the death of the author was put forward by theorist Roland Barthes, and the idea is that when it comes to interpretation and understanding of a piece of media, the author's intention goes a certain extent, and it can be informative, but ultimately it is the audience that interprets symbols that have been put forward by the author, which may carry cultural and personal meanings not intentionally meant to be forwarded by the author, but nonetheless revealing.
Yeah, not to be the co-host of a mech podcast, but you fucking nerd. Okay, to the game.
Got my ass.
So this game is called Labor Crime is Real Crime. Because on this podcast, we believe that time theft by corporations is a real crime.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is I have gone through the many OVAs episodes and movies of the Patlabor franchise. And I have taken what has happened in these episodes, like the main instigating crime, and written it up as an article header talking about it. I have then gone to Japan Today and found articles in the crime section.
Oh my God.
And I've taken those titles. I've adjusted some of them. Some are fully just cut from the cloth, and everything kind of has a bit of editorialization. But we're going to go through this, and we're going to go between you. One's going to pick, and if they don't get it, they don't get it. And you're going to have to decide if this is a labor crime from Patlabor or a real crime in Japan as of this week. Okay?
Oh my God.
Okay. So we're going to start with Brian.
Okay.
So I'm going to read the title for you, and you have to tell me if this is a labor crime or a real crime. Units were dispatched to a local hiking trail due to reports of an animal attacking hikers, rendering the trail unusable for hours. Is that a labor crime or a real crime?
This feels like what you get to when you have 80 episodes of this. I feel like this is a labor crime.
This is a labor crime because the animal that was attacking them was a labor that looked like a bear. But yes, that is. So that's a point for Brian. Over to Nico.
Okay.
Police mistakenly arrest a man in a porn investigation case.
In a porn investigation case?
Correct.
Real crime. Porn is a problem, I feel, for a lot of law enforcement.
That's a point to Nico. Yeah.
Yay!
This is a man who created porn without somebody's consent. So.
Oh. I was going to make a lighthearted hikikomori joke, but...
Shit.
Brian, locals protest the opening of a new highway through a place considered sacred in some cultures. Officers are dispatched to clear the way.
Oh, man. I could see that so happening. I'm going to say labor crime, though.
That is, in fact, a labor crime. They are trying to plow down a tree, and they have to send cop robots out to stop the protesters?
Well, Alice, the reason for that is obvious. Tree big.
That's from episode 8, Elusive Green. Nico.
Truly, don't you, Brian? Brian, have you smoked Elusive Green? How would you rate that strain?
Have you smoked? I'm on that protest loud.
Okay, Alice. Okay.
City cop wins local sports tournament, but can't stay for the awards ceremony due to severe understaffing in the department.
This is a labor crime.
This is a labor crime.
I feel like there's a baseball episode. Yeah!
Oh, it's a judo episode. And yes, they do judo in the robots. That's a point for you.
We had judo at my high school. I would pay money to see giant mecha judo. Has that been in its own anime yet? Not any war, just mechs for judo.
That's called G Gundam. Oh, well, not just judo, but same vibes, wrestling.
Just for judo. Okay.
Brian, over to you. Explosion rocks construction site, causing setbacks in project. Police have responded, but no fatalities are reported.
No fatalities? That's not anime. Real crime.
That is a labor crime.
Damn it.
Sorry, I intentionally put fatalities in there and gotcha. That's from episode 19, Shadow in the Geo Front. Nico.
Yes.
Former arsonist, recently released, is arrested after being caught due to a string of industrial arsons.
That's real crime, and I feel like that man is innocent because no crime that's funny should be prosecuted.
That's a point. It is a real crime.
Yeah!
Yeah, he was apparently arrested in 2 weeks after release. Brian.
I'm here.
Police find man who has been living in a house's crawl space and stealing food when owners had left the house for years.
This is several real crimes, so I'm going to say a real crime. I've heard of this.
This is the entirety of Reddit Dude, let's not meet.
This is the movie Parasite, but also not.
And the only reason is because it did happen the last week in Japan that I could find an article of.
Oh, shit.
But
That's such a good stipulation. You got me so bad.
Oh, I got you. Episode 38, Underground Labyrinth case. They find out that somebody's been stealing their food and whiskey because they've just been living in the sewers under the building.
That shit is scary. That's terrifying to me.
Legitimately, there's no lock on our attic, and I'm low-key afraid. My very brave spouse the other night was like, I feel like I've heard footsteps on the roof, and I'm like, shut the fuck up.
No, they haven't. Shut the fuck up. It's Shut the Fuck Up Friday.
I don't want to hear about it.
You just have to be prepared. Nico.
Yes.
String of ATM thefts baffle police. Offers reward for information.
Oh, okay. I've seen a video of someone actually doing this with construction equipment, but I am going to say it's a labor crime because I want to see someone do it with a mech.
It's a labor crime because they were doing it with a labor mech.
Yes! I want to see it!
It's a very funny episode, but yes, they use laborers to just
offer a reward for a crime where they're taking the money, though. They don't need the reward.
Because other people didn't get the money.
Oh,
no,
right,
you're not offering the reward.
True. They're counting on narcs?
To them for coming back.
Can you imagine if you came back, you're like, I'll take that check, please. These bills are marked.
This shit better
idea
clear.
What I was thinking just now.
You're totally good, but it's very funny.
No,
I love it.
That was, wow.
Nope, it's great. Brian.
All vibes, no thoughts.
You're on that elusive green.
Woman arrested for stealing ice cream from delivery truck because it was too hot.
I am this woman. Labor crime, though, because she did it in a bag.
That is a real crime.
No!
An Aichi woman was arrested this week for stealing ice cream and said it was because it was too hot.
Arrested?
Yeah,
for
arrested.
That 99-cent strawberry dip? Damn. Was it worth it, though?
For the Gundam with the gummy eyeball sliding down it?
Do you think the cop also put the handcuff on her and then they held hands?
And the cop also had an ice cream.
And then the detective asked her why she hadn't killed herself yet.
Nico, last question.
Yes.
Man arrested for cutting woman's skirt from behind with scissors.
I hate the earth. Is my answer. Now I'm just imagining a mech wearing a skirt getting sexually harassed, and I'm simultaneously laughing and also so depressed. I'm gonna say real crime. I want to think the world of mechs is better.
It was a real crime!
Yay! I'm going to a place untouched by sexism. Mechs!
What I imagined was a normal woman walking down the street and then a giant labor mech behind her with giant scissors trying to very, very surgically cut open her skirt.
I just want to be clear. They investigate crimes where people are involved and there might just be mechs. They also investigate those. But
oh my god.
All of it is mechs.
Okay.
All the way down.
Well, that was our game with 5 points. Nico wins. Brian with 3. Good job.
I did it.
Did I really win? Because someone cut someone's skirt with scissors, so I feel like I lost.
Hey, they got arrested. Like ice cream thieves.
The leftism leaving my body when someone does a sex crime.
Anyway, we've got a flash transmission. Brian, can you pull up the communique?
Dear OSG Pod, I'm a war veteran whose last deployment in Cambodia ended with a haunting reminder that what has happened will happen again. I am in a position of enormous political and military power now as a retired war hero / Mads Mikkelsen and Death Stranding lookalike, and one of my pupils is giving me eyes. Do I pursue this relationship? And if so, how much geopolitical violence should I insert into the backdrop of its climactic conclusion, given that I have nigh infinite military power at my disposal for not at all contrived reasons?
That's a tough one.
It's a tough situation to be in there, writer.
I just hope that they're safe in their cocktail.
I assume this was unsigned for OPSEC.
Yeah. It seems that the writer has put their name down, but then it was scratched out and somebody else put their name in. I think it says Arakawa?
Huh. Weird. I don't know. But, this is a tough situation. I guess, he didn't really expand on it, but, like she an 8? She a 6? I think, look, here's the thing. even without the unlimited military power, even without, all these things at your disposal, I think, you got to get your dick wet. And sometimes you got to dip in a pond nearby you. And if that keeps you focused on the mission.
Patlabor 2, you got to get your dick wet.
What about you? What about you, Nico? Do you have any advice for this pilot?
Okay. All right, bud. I need you to look down at your left hand. If there's a ring on your finger, there are a number of steps you need to take. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm saying that you need to confront something, which is that you may be unsatisfied in your marriage that you undertook before experiencing a major trauma that has perhaps made you feel like a different person with a different perspective on the world and different needs. So, item 1, if you've got unlimited military power and a lot of influence and a certain amount of money, therapy is expensive, but not that expensive. And then item 2, divorce your wife. It's literally not going to hurt you at all. I promise.
Divorce.
So now that you've undertaken, this is a pro-divorce podcast. We knew, when Goto and Arakawa had to call it off, we were there with them. We are a pro-divorce podcast. Okay, so now that you've undertaken steps 1 and 2, presumably, you have gone to therapy and you have gotten divorced. It should be enough years in the future that you've allowed your female student who's maybe having inappropriate thoughts and feelings about you because you are in a position of power and respect over her, and she admires you. There's probably given some time for the edges to come off of maybe some juvenile feelings and for her to progress in her career. Now you can approach her like a person and construct a relationship that better tethers you to the world that you live in post your trauma.
He never said in this letter that she was a person, to be clear.
If you're trying to fuck a mech, just do it.
Brian, what about you?
Yeah, Brian, what you got?
Look, I'm someone with a perfectly healthy and normal history of student-teacher relations and where they go.
Oh, no, fuck!
Wait, what?
Oh, no, you know this.
I think that you should probably... I really like Nico's response. I think that there's a 4th step. And also, so there's a 4th step. The 4th step is revisit this dynamic in the future when perhaps she may be someone of equal social footing and you don't seem like a weird predator in that way. The answer to your other question, which is how much geopolitical violence should I insert into the backdrop of the climactic conclusion?
Oh, yeah.
So if you look to your right, there's a slider on your board that just says geopolitical violence. I'm going to need you to knock that all the way up to a 10 because this is anime. So,
yeah, what did you think you were in, a K-drama? Turn that shit up. I mean that even if you go to therapy, get a divorce, and approach her with an even power dynamic, I am going to need you to blow up some bridges.
I am going to need you.
Just a little. Just some.
Just to make your point. Because you are making points. I'm going to be real with you. You were making points.
Honestly.
Not to be Suge schooled, but...
Not to be Suge schooled, but in these cases, I'm going to add a step 5. Minimum 3 blimps. I think...
Oh, absolutely.
It's a key step in your recovery.
Blimps are crucial. Blimps are crucial.
Bitches love blimps.
High contrast, unmanned blimps.
This maneuver of getting your dick wet by getting a divorce, respecting women, going to therapy, and enacting massive damage to a city center has often been called Hindenburging. So if you...
Oh, no, the kids call it 9/11 now. But yeah, I think that's our advice. And, I hope everything works out for you. And I hope you can move to the next stage of hand-holding with your partner.
Make sure to use protection. Ideally, you should both be wearing gloves, and hers should be thematically white, and yours should be thematically black.
Yeah.
It's real subtle. So that was our flash transmission. Guys, is there anything about Patlabor 2, the movie, that you really need to get off your chest? Any last thoughts on it?
I love women.
Goto is my sweet baby girl. I am rotating him in my head.
Just slowly rotating. My closing thoughts are Shinobu. My number's out there on the official entry character profile for you, it says that your age is secret with a heart emoji. And that works for me because we both have secret ages. And that's this episode of On the Shoulders of Giants, where we discuss Patlabor 2, the movie. Thanks for listening. Pilots, remember, you can reach out for advice to the team at our email, questions@osgpod.com. And non-pilots can send general questions or feedback to the same address. You can also catch up with us on social media. Links are in the description for updates and more. Make sure to check back next time where we'll be discussing Gunbuster. Until then, goodbye. I love you.
Goodbye, I love you.
Goodbye, I love you.
I'm holding your hand.
I'm holding your hand, and
I'm putting the handcuffs on. Oh, we're all handcuffed together.